Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited tonight to have Tom Hojnacki with me. I keep mentioning Tom Hojnacki, and people will say, "Oh, I know that guy. He's a jazz player." Another guy says, "I've seen him conduct," and someone else said, "Yeah, he's a composer." I mean, he actually does a lot of different things. So he's got what you might call an unusually varied musical career. As a keyboard player, he's worked with touring productions such as Chorus Line, Altar Boys, and the Big Apple Circus. He's appeared with the Prague Radio Symphony Orchestra, the Claflin Hill Symphony. Um, Orchestra, the New Bedford Symphony Orchestra, as a chamber musician and performances of the music of Brahms and Schubert, Bartók, Messiaen, Shostakovich. And as a jazz pianist, he's appeared with Billy Pierce and Joe Lovano, Jimmy Giuffre, George Garzone, and many others. And as a conductor, he's led numerous performances of ballet, opera, musical theater, and symphonic repertoire. Written over 50 compositions, some of which we'll hear tonight, including works for musical theater, orchestra, band, chorus, chamber ensembles. We're going to hear some of the Symphony No. 2, which is not online yet, so this is a special treat. Um, and he has taught at Dean College and the England Conservatory's music as well. And he and Joe have co-authored a book called The Berklee Book of Jazz Harmony, which I have bought. So welcome, Tom. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for hosting me tonight.
Yeah, we have reviewed a bunch of your stuff. We came up with about, I don't know, maybe 11 of these, and there's so much more to do. So we're just giving people a taste of what you do. I'd like to always start by asking how you got into the whole world of music. Were you from a musical family to start with?
Well, my mother's side of the family was particularly musical,
Mm.
not so much as professionals, uh, but as amateur musicians. We had a couple of church organists and
Mm.
amateur singers among her brothers and sisters. Uh, Second generation, my cousins. I have a cousin who's a professional pianist in the Detroit area.
Ah.
Another cousin who's a jazz pianist who lives in Wisconsin and works quite a
Mhm.
bit. And his son, my cousin, I guess once removed by
Mm.
generation, is Miles Mikkonen, who won the Met national auditions a few years back and has launched
Wow.
a wonderful career as a lyric tenor. So
Oh,
we're
wow.
proud of Miles. He's named by his father, who's a jazz musician, after Miles Davis, of course.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And so, when did you know as you were growing up, I'm going to be a musician? How did that happen for you?
I don't know. I mean, I've always felt that I think, from a very early age,
Mm.
my mother used to play the piano around the house, and I became interested in it at an early age. And I think
Mhm.
I saw um, one of the Leonard Bernstein Young People's concerts on television, and it was the one
Ah.
where he was hosting the New York Rock and Roll Ensemble, which was a bunch of Juilliard students, among whom was Michael Kamen, the great film composer, who played
Oh,
oboe in the New York Rock and Roll Ensemble. And
wow.
on that same program, they had a fellow dressed up in a costume who looked like Bach, who was demonstrating the Moog synthesizer, and Wendy Carlos was switched on Bach, and
Oh.
that really just flipped me out. I just
Mm.
loved it. I loved the sound of it, and that album, the Switched on Bach album, was the first record that I ever bought with my own money.
Wow. I remember that album. Yeah. It
Yeah,
goes back a
yeah, yeah.
ways.
And
Yeah.
I played, played that out. It just, I mean, it was something that I cherished, and
Hmm.
really came to love Baroque music. I grew up in a Finnish Lutheran church in Detroit, and they had
Mm.
a strong tradition of choral singing, and part singing in the congregation. We had a strong musician who was the organist and music director there.
Mm.
And I grew up in Detroit, and the Detroit public schools were legendary for their music programs, even
Oh, really? Yeah.
in, in tough times.
Hmm.
Went to Cass Tech High School, which was a citywide school where many famous musicians have, you know, cut their
Wow.
teeth and prospered.
Hmm.
A lot of jazz musicians, a lot of orchestral musicians. Yeah, but that music was around. I mean, I remember I was a trombone player in my formative years, and I actually played on a
Mm.
few disco recording sessions. One,
Nice.
one of my classmates at Cass Tech, Greg Fillinganes, was Michael Jackson's music director for a long time, and
Wow.
became I mean, he's played really with everybody.
Mm.
Barry Allen, the great jazz pianist, was another. She was the year ahead of me. Lots
Wow.
of musicians who've gone on to have very, very strong careers. They may not be household names, but they're
Yeah, that's
very much
wonderful.
me. So I feel proud to have gone through that. It was a wonderful program.
Oh, that's great.
So the first thing that we're going to hear is a piece. It's the first movement from the second brass quintet that I wrote, and I think this comes from about I don't know. This is a while back, at least 20 years. This first movement is called "A Fanfare for Democracy," which couldn't be more relevant at the moment.
All
So
right.
here we go.
All right. Bravo. Now, how do you go about writing something like that? I mean, you have this wonderful motif that you develop. Do you just come up in your mind with a ba 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 ba? I mean, how do you come up with these ideas and how do you develop them?
Ooh, good question. I mean, this was 20 years ago. I don't even
Yeah.
remember what I did this morning.
But
Well, I think with this piece, I was kind of going with this particular piece. I was kind of going for the sound of that, like the Washington ceremonial, like the ceremonial military brass band
yeah. Yep.
that plays at things, and just kind of, I was trying to emulate that, and also write to the strengths of my friends who were playing in this ensemble.
This next thing must have a very deep meaning for you. Lament for our loved ones killed in Iraq. That's definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was all the carnage of the Iraq War at that time.
Mm, hmm.
Let's just translate it. I'll rededicate it to the people of Ukraine and all the
Mm,
innocents in Israel and
yeah.
Gaza right now,
It's
so
just sad that, we as a human race, at least in my lifetime, I was hoping would be somewhat better off than we were 50 years ago. It's just sad that we're still all killing off each other. It's just very sad. But anyway, I'm glad you wrote this piece. Let's play it for folks.
okay, we'll do. Yeah, it's really interesting. I heard the great jazz pianist and arranger Claire Fisher was interviewed once, and he said, if it brings me to tears and I feel like it's the most beautiful music I've ever heard, then that's enough for me. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I
Yeah.
always get to that point, but I generally things, if it's moving me, then I feel like I'm on the right track.
Yeah, definitely. Very,
I
very
try
true.
not to be too esoteric. I try to be emotional in,
Mm,
try to evoke or try to express emotion, you know.
right, right,
A lot of the compositional process, though, is fairly dispassionate. You're just working out issues,
right.
musical ideas and musical relationships and what you're
Hmm.
doing.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, those are the two brass pieces. As I said, I was a trombone player in my formative years, and so I have
Mm,
real affection for that sound.
yeah.
And I feel like I understand the instruments, and I've really enjoyed writing for the quintet and um, bridging between the tapered horns and the conical horns. In that particular piece, I used flugelhorn for the second trumpet part, and it makes a beautiful bridge with the horn. You can hear that kind of seamless.
Mm,
The trumpet starts, the flugelhorn continues, and then the horn continues, and it's like one seamless voice.
interesting. Yeah. Huh.
So just a little orchestrational thing, and I tend to do that quite a lot.
Mm,
Like as Wagner did it too. He
hmm.
actually had his tubans created to create a bridge between the trombones and the horns and the tubas. The
Huh.
Wagner tuba. I had a series when I was teaching at Berklee. I was at the Berklee College of Music for 23 years before I
Mm,
retired from academia.
hmm.
And at one point, I was doing a series called Hojnacki and Shostakovich together again for the first time. And so in that series, with a group, I would do one of Shostakovich's big string and piano pieces. So I did
Mm,
on my program, I did the quintet, and I wrote a companion string quartet for the second half of the concert. And then
mm,
on another program, I wrote I did the trio in E minor and the Shostakovich trio in E minor, and then wrote a companion piece from which we'll hear a couple of pieces later on called
mm,
excursion
hmm.
versions. And then the last time out, the cellist that I'd been working with, Leo Iguchi, who's a wonderful freelancer in the Boston area and is also the founder and director, along with his wife Sasha, of the Willamette Valley Chamber Music Festival, played on this with me. He and I played the Shasti cello sonata, and then I wrote this piece for him. And
Mm,
this is the fourth movement. It's just allegro. It has obvious uh, owes a debt to Bartók and perhaps Janacek and Shostakovich. Central European uh,
mm,
a Central European sound to it. So this
hmm.
is the fourth movement of my sonata for cello and piano.
Excellent.
It's Leo Iguchi, and I'm the pianist, for better or worse. Yay, yay.
Yeah,
That was actually the premiere performance. So
that's wonderful.
yeah, we're chasing each other around a little bit, but it
Now
was,
it's just piano and cello, right? It sounded so
yeah,
full with just those two instruments. That was amazing.
yeah,
Mm.
well,
Mhm.
there's lots of strings on both of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you had asked me about, how do I go about writing a piece, that,
Mm.
you know, develops a motive. And, it really is, it's really quite simple, actually. You have a musical shape, it's a rhythm and, some intervallic content, and there are really only a few transformations. You can flip it upside down, you can invert
Mm.
it, you can repeat
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
you can transpose it, you can retrograde it,
Use
flip
parts of it.
it from back to, you can fragment it,
Hmm.
you can augment it,
Hmm.
you can make the rhythms twice as fast or three times as fast, or
Mm.
and so it's really just a question of taking those pieces and trying them out against one another and seeing what fits. And
Mm.
then you also have to think about your overall shape of the piece and what the narrative is supposed to be and how those variations are going to fit into it.
Hmm.
And a lot of it is just trial and error.
Wow.
And it's called Tune Variations in Fugue. I uh, when I got the commission, I was saying to myself, what am I going to do with the saxophone quartet? I hadn't really heard all the literature. It's really a deep, deep
Mm.
ensemble. I mean, they'll make you cry. I mean, the pathos is everything. But I thought,
Mm.
you know, saxophones are funny. Let's do a humorous piece. And I've always really enjoyed Carl Stallings' music. And I thought, what would a serious piece of music be like if Carl Stallings had written it? So this is
I
called
love it.
Tune Variations and Fugues. So there's a theme. It sounds like a cartoon theme. And then
Yeah.
the rest of it is developing variation based on that original shape. So
Mm.
every few seconds it morphs into a different style.
Huh.
Then there's a Baroque fugue replete with wrong notes based on that original theme. It becomes the fugue subject, and then
Okay.
and there's a madcap quodlibet at the end,
I'm
and
sorry, Metcalf, what?
a quodlibet. So you'll hear some familiar tunes
Oh, okay.
topped off. I should say another one of my great favorites and a wonderful musician, a tremendous musician and humorist, Peter Schickele, or the
Mm.
composer behind PDQ Bach, was
Oh,
a
okay.
big influence on me. I met him when I was a teenager, and
Oh,
sadly just passed away. There was a big obit for him yesterday
oh,
in the
wow.
Times. Great, great, great musician. So
Mm.
here's here's Schickele's influence in tune variations and fugue for
Love it.
saxophone quartet. Shameless, I know.
Wow. I have to confess, I lost count. I probably found about 10 things I recognized, but how many different references were in there? Did you keep account of it?
I don't know. It alludes. There's a
Yeah.
little bit of the 1812 overture, and there's
Yep. There's some classical
The Irish washerwoman, and
yeah,
Pop Goes the Weasel, and a few
some
things.
music,
But that it's just
movie stuff.
after the fugue they pop in. The rest of it is all original, and it really is.
Mm,
They're not variations in the sense that they're melodic variations that fit a form, but
right.
rather permutations of that original shape, which is kind of da ba ba da, that
Mm,
shape, and it comes back, and you fragments and uses part of it, but there's that J thing that keeps happening, it goes
yeah.
ba-da-dee, or body ah, Let's go back a little bit farther. Now, I am, I mentioned that I was a trombonist for a good many years in my formative years, but I was also a singer. That
Oh,
was really kind of my first thing. I sang a lot as a kid. I was a child,
wow.
and then my undergraduate degree is in voice. I went to the New England Conservatory,
Oh,
and when I was, in my teens and 20s, I wanted to be the next Fischer Dieskau. I wanted to be a leader singer and an opera singer.
nice.
And I drifted away from that, but I've
Mm,
written a fair amount of vocal music, and actually my Carnegie Hall debut was with this piece, which is the three songs of Richard Wilbur. The cycle is called Paths, and
mm,
it is about a path. This one is called John Chrysostom, who was a saint in the Orthodox Catholic Church, and Richard Wilbur wrote this very powerful poem.
mm.
This is it's scored for cello and piano and baritone voice. This is my friend, the great baritone David Murray singing. This is a Payne Hall concert at
Mm.
Harvard, long time ago already.
Okay.
I feel like I'm getting old, Andrew, but this
That's
is
timeless though. Timeless.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah. I think it's still pretty strong. So this is
It's beautiful.
John Chrysostom from Paths,
Mm,
poems of Richard Wilbur,
yeah.
David Murray baritone.
Mm.
Just a quickie.
Wow, very nice. What a voice. Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah, he's great. And that was 20 years ago at least. He
Mm.
sounds better now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I've done lots of, one of the, I drifted from singing into playing and composition and music directing and then conducting. And one of the great joys was getting to hire some of my old friends
Mm.
for opera performances. And
Hmm.
I did Tosca with David as Scarpia and Carmen, where he sang Escamillo, and some
Mm.
Verdi and Mozart and Rossini. So it's been a lot of
Nice.
fun to do that. I love opera and vocal music, and I think that just a sense of line and melody informs everything that I do.
Hmm. Yeah.
If you understand the voice, instruments are all just an extension of the voice.
Hmm.
Some of my most recent compositions were songs in memory of a friend of mine who passed away. A lot of his
Mm.
favorite poems. They still are, unfortunately, unpremiered yet because of the
Mm.
pandemic. I have to make that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, shall we go on and move on to some more string music? Would you like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So this is now the Adagio sostenuto, which is it's a movement for strings only, but it is the second movement from my first symphony, and it's it's complete in and of itself. So it's been extracted, a number of times for performance, but it's the Adagio from this much larger 35-minute symphony. So this
Mm.
is the Prague Radio Symphony Orchestra.
Mm.
Uh, Julius Williams, my colleague from Berklee, conducting,
Hmm.
and we did this in the Czech Republic in Prague, actually. So it's a
Love it.
real nice recording. Beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful hall, great string players.
Hmm. That is so lush, Tom. And I have to confess, it's one of those things I didn't want it to end. And I was thinking, I wonder how he's going to end this thing. It's like,
Thank you. It's sort of, sorrow and catharsis, and
yeah,
I'm moved by it. That's one of those that, makes me,
yeah, sure.
I remember the first orchestra piece that I wrote, and I mean, it was, this was when I was doing everything on paper, and
Wow. Yeah.
not, you didn't have the computer to check. Well,
Also,
I think if you listen to computer playback, you can have some false notions about orchestration.
interesting.
And sometimes the MIDI playback won't
Mm,
won't produce the same overtones and resonance that you would get
right.
with
Yeah.
actual acoustic instruments. And so, I mean, the point that I was trying to make before was that when I wrote this, it was all in my head, and then I heard it
Mm,
live for real, and it was just I was just floored by it, and
wow.
there's that old Greek myth of Aphrodite, the goddess of wisdom, popping up, Zeus giving birth to Aphrodite from his head.
Mm,
That's kind of what it felt like for me,
felt like that, giving birth to a music
my
over your head.
mental progeny. uh, it's hard to describe. It's a really beautiful
Yeah.
process, when you labor over something, and then it becomes
Mm,
real and ethereal in the air.
hmm
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Some of these are studio recordings, some of them are live.
hmm
Some of the studio recordings most often are single take. For composers, the recording is the testament for most people, and
Mm,
it becomes the performance tradition as well. So,
hmm
if you want somebody to play your piece, they want to listen to the recording.
Right.
If they're working from the score, it takes them a long time to get to know how it sounds.
Mm.
Yeah, speaking of that, some of this stuff is on Apple Music, so if anybody's
Oh,
interested,
excellent.
the first symphony's on Apple Music, and that silly saxophone, uh,
Mm,
the Berlin Saxophone Quartet piece, Tune Variations and Fugue,
excellent.
is on Apple Music as well.
Hmm
So let's see. Let's do a little bit more chamber music now. So this next piece is called Luscious, and it's from a larger uh, piece with three movements called In Just Spring, which obviously is based on the famous E. E. Cummings poem. And it was written as a companion piece for a concert that featured the Messiaen Quartet for the End of Time. So it's written for violin, clarinet, cello, and piano. And this is the Claflin Hill Symphony Chamber Players. It's Paul Serapine on clarinet, Johannes Soltz on cello, Angel Volchinov on violin, and I'm the pianist again. So this is called Puddle Luscious, and at the very beginning you'll hear an evocation of In Just Spring. And then we're off to the races with some sort of mid-century modern French harmony,
Mm,
inspired by Messiaen, and stuff that sounds hopefully childlike and spring feverish.
hmm I love it. Just to share with people that don't know E. Cummings, this is one of my favorite. I think I was introduced to him with this poem. I'll just do a little bit of it. In just spring, when the world is mud luscious, the little blame balloon man whistles far and wee, and Eddie and Bill come running from marbles and piracies. And it's spring when the world is puddle wonderful. Just oh, that's wonderful. Very nice.
Yeah,
Mm.
just, evocations of childhood
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, evocations of childhood and spring fever.
Yeah.
Sometimes I write things which are, for want of a better classification, classical forms. I have movements that are uh, uh, entitled Adagio sostenuto and Allegro vivace, in the
Right.
grand manner. And then there are things that have evocative titles, which are either self-created or are adopted as the inspiration for things. And this
Yeah.
EP was, uh, you know, uh,
That's great.
largely the inspiration for this. I was trying to paint what scenes from the poem.
Mm.
It used to be that you'd spend a month writing the piece, and then you'd spend another month copying out the parts. And
Mm.
now you can just extract the parts and clean them up.
Yeah.
It's a long process to do it well, but
Oh my
it's
God. Yeah.
ever so much faster. And if you want to make a change, oh, what a difference! It's just
Mm.
great. So, have we got time for one more?
I think so.
Yeah, let's do. I wrote this. I wrote my second symphony about 8 years ago. This piece was expansive because it was inspired by a trip that I took with Joe Mulholland backpacking in the Grand Canyon. So I'm lying in a tent, with a mesh roof, and all night long, the sun is on one side of the canyon and the moon is on the other side of the canyon.
Wow.
And so you could see them. They're both totally visible all night.
Wow. All
So
night long. Oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah.
Wow.
This is the Claflin Hill Symphony Orchestra. This is an excerpt from the second part of Symphony No. 2, The Canyon.
That's so powerful. I love that. Oh my God.
Oh, thank
Now,
you.
do you ever get in situations where you actually are at the moment and you write notes right there? Or...
And actually,
Mhm.
I was sitting in the campsite, and there was a stream that rolled by, and I just put my feet in this cold stream and sat and looked at what was going around me, and I started hearing stuff in my head. It's kind of it's interesting, but I don't know if you've ever been in the Grand Canyon, but it is one of the most silent places.
Oh, really? Oh,
Oh, oh, yeah. I mean, it's just the sound just gets sucked up. You don't hear anything at all.
really? Wow.
Yeah, so it's a great place for music to gestate because you can hear what's in your head.
Wow. This has been so wonderful, Tom. Thank you so much.